Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I'm very excited to welcome back SCA Alumnus R.J. Cutler. We're going to be talking about his new documentary feature on Apple TV Plus, Billie Eilish, The World's a Little Blurry, which is currently available on Apple TV Plus, although I know a lot of you may have gotten a screener. Hopefully there are some subscribers out there who had a chance to check out the film well beyond getting a free link from me. But let's welcome up RJ and really dive into this. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type them up in the Q&A box. And then when we open it up, we will invite some of you over to speak to RJ live, and others, if you just want me to read your question out loud, just put that in the question when you type it up. So RJ, over to you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I am really curious to know what led you to Billie Eilish. This is really such an intimate work, and it feels like the sort of film that someone who really loves the artist would make. But I'm curious where that starting point was for you, because I didn't particularly know Billie's music that well before your film. I mean, I recognize some of the music, and I just love that I get to now really sort of discover her entire catalog. So I'm curious what that experience was for you, discovering her.
Yeah, it was certainly one of discovery for me as well. I got to figure out the years in COVID brain, which has made it harder and harder to figure years. But we're 2021 now, so in the summer of 2018. I think in August, I was invited to meet with Billie and her family at her home here in Los Angeles, the home you see in the movie. And I went and I sat with them, and it was that meeting that really, I mean, I knew a little bit about her. I knew some of her music. I knew a little bit about her career arc. I knew that she was kind of, she was an internet phenomenon, a social media phenomenon, more than anything else. That she had released an EP, she had yet to release a full-length album, and had, I think, well over 100 million streams at that point, and millions of followers. But I didn't really know much else about her, and meeting her was what persuaded me that there was a film to be made here. We had a kind of instant connection. I want to say filmmaker to musician, artist to artist. It was just very easy to chat, and we talked about my approach, and we talked about what she might be interested in, like from the experience of having a film made about her. And I confessed to her that I identify as a teenage girl, and she had things to say about Nashville, which is a television series that I had conceived and directed, and I don't know. It was, and she was just, she's Billie, so she was incredibly magnetic and compelling, but also the scene around her, the all of that stuff that you see in the film, this house bursting at the seams with racks of clothes and boxes of stuff, and opened and unopened suitcases, and a trapeze in the backyard, and Maggie and various members of her team, and Phineas was there, and the fact that she writes all of her stuff with her brother, and it just became instantly clear to me that there was an opportunity here to tell the story, not just of a young artist coming of age, but of a young woman coming of age. And I was very compelled by that, and with music to boot. So that's where it began.
So that answers obviously one big question for me, which was, my God, how did he have this kind of access, like before she really exploded? I guess my question is then, so you were brought in by the family in a sort of like a process of someone was commissioning the film?
Yes, that they decided they wanted a film made. It wasn't that we approached them and said, which sometimes, of course, we do. I'm very interested in making a film about you, subject. That was not the case here. This was a case of you know, it was my manager got a call from the label. Would RJ be interested in meeting with Billie? And they there had been filming done, but really, you know, in the crudest way. There were a couple of shows that had been filmed. There were GoPros that Phineas and Billie had in the bedroom that they would occasionally turn on while they were writing. There was, of course, this vast family archive, just of stuff that Maggie had shot on her iPhone. It wasn't an organized archive. It was just, you know, it was just shit on a hard drive. None of it was organized in any way. Now you can type in the word "the" and find 10,000 instances of it in there, in all that footage, because we took it all. But they didn't, you know, and of course nobody knows what it means to say we want a documentary made, or what the approach would be. And my instinct, this also based on that first meeting, was that if we were going to do something, what we would do was a true verite film. I knew it from moment one. It was, you know, in an important way, it was just too damn interesting to muck up with the usual, you know, crud of documentary, you know, formality, like sit down interviews and stuff like that. This was life, and it was exploding before our very eyes. So I thought this would, you know, we will, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it old school. You know, it's going to go back to my roots, and it's going to go back to cinema verite's roots. And I said so in the meeting, and they were, I think, really excited about that.
Well, tell us a little bit about how, I mean, were there ground rules set by either you or them? Because, you know, in her art, she speaks very explicitly about things that, you know, a lot of people keep to themselves. So I do appreciate how much she gives of herself, both in the film and in her music. But, you know, being that age and having a film crew around you and having so many changes professionally happening, I can't imagine how sort of anxious and terrified she could potentially be throughout that process. Can you tell us, like, how your relationship was with the family in terms of when, like, if they at any point had, because they're inviting you in to do this, control over what you can or cannot, like, film, in terms of really, like, anything pertaining to her career?
Yeah, we had only one ground rule, which is that I would have final cut, and that was established between us in our first meeting, as I now do with anybody I'm going to make a film about. And you know, the filmmaking's up to me. And you're right, Billie is a very open person. But she's also a person who is in complete control of all aspects of her work and her career. And she has surrounded herself with a remarkable team of adult professionals who support that and who understand the wisdom about it. In fact, the first day we were shooting, we were in London, and at the end of the day, the crew and I were hanging out in the bar, and we ran into Billie's guitar tech, Trevor, who would become a good friend of ours, and we invited him to have a beer with us. And I said, what's the gag here? Like, what's going on? And he said, well, it's quite amazing, because there are two things about these two guys, about Billie and Phineas. They don't give a fuck, and they're always right. and they've surrounded themselves with people who get that and support that and find ways to make all that happen. But in that context, the one thing I never saw her, or the one thing that I never saw her want to control, was the work that we were doing. This was we were there to film, and when we were there to film, we filmed. But you have to, you also have to understand that fundamental to my filmmaking process anyway, and certainly I think to successful cinema verite filming, is that the story doesn't belong to me; it belongs to them. This is their lives, and the only thing I really can work with is their trust in me, their faith in me, their consistent experience that I am the person who I promised them I would be. And while that means while I'm there filming, I film whatever is happening. I don't decide when I'm there filming. I decide when I'd like to film, but they have their lives, and I don't just barge in and show up. I'm not, I ask first.
Yeah.
And I say I'd like to come on I'd like to come to Australia, and I'd like to meet you guys in London, and next week I think it would be great if we filmed at the house the whole week as we're leading up to the to the show at the Greek. There are it's a process, and so the subject can't help but have certain control, but that's different than, you can't film me talking about this, I won't allow this in, you can. She did not have that kind of prerogative, which again is also not to say that I didn't show them the film. I didn't hear what they said when they saw it. They saw the first cut they saw, I think, was 3 hours long. Their response was, was kind of all I could have hoped for. But Billie's smart. She had thoughts, and I loved her thoughts, and they weren't very different from my thoughts. And sometimes they were super helpful to my process. She's as smart a subject about storytelling and cinema as I've ever worked. She's a lot smarter as a subject. We're off the. I'm about to go. That's my voice I use when I need to remind everybody that we're off the record. But anyway, she's smarter than some other subjects I've worked with. Let's just put it that way. She really has an amazing storytelling instinct, and there are many people, myself included, who would not be surprised if her career involves filmmaking.
Sure.
It's a passion of
Certainly
hers, and
seems like that by the end of the film, that's the direction that she's going in.
Well, it's certainly the direction she's going in with the with her music videos and other things. And yeah, I mean, she's so. But I didn't. This is the film that everybody is seeing now is the director's cut.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't change a frame given the opportunity, and and if you gave me 3 more months of editing, I'd take those 3 months off. So.
Well, I'm curious, when you are setting out to figure out your production schedule, presumably there are some obvious things, like you were saying, the tour or right before a major concert. You've also got wonderful moments in her bedroom where they're like writing songs together. What's your philosophy for scheduling the non sort of obvious times to go and shoot?
My answer to almost every process question you could think of is I'm in the moment, and I'm going moment to moment. We thought at the beginning that we would end the movie with a scene that is not even in the movie. We thought we would shoot until her kind of homecoming performance at the Greek, and a month into shooting, I was like, no, we got to go all the way to the Grammys. So that was the one kind of, I don't know, tent pole you know, you're always looking for something like that. Election night, graduation, Grammys. These are good things to build your film towards. They, you know, they help organize. But other than that, I'm really, everything about this process is remaining in the moment. Everything I'm often asked what was the most surprising thing that happened during this remarkable year in Billie's life. And I don't know, because I'm not expecting anything, so I'm not surprised by anything. I'm not wanting anything, so I'm not disappointed when something doesn't happen. I I don't even know like what kind of example to use, but I don't care if she won 11 Grammys or if she won no Grammys. I'm fully in the moment to tell the story of this young woman coming of age as a person and as an artist. I mean, you know, it's like, and that's the kind of beauty of verite, is that if you submit to that, if you are always in the moment and all you're trying to do is see things as clearly as possible, you're following life. You're not, you're not, um, you're leaving it to the gods. It's that Orson Welles line, in a scripted film, he said, the director is God, but in a documentary, God is the director. And I'd like to say the gods are the director. It's not a religious thing. It's it's a more mythic notion. And that's what verite is all about, is just kind of following life as it's unfolding before you.
Well, yeah, as the year unfolds and she's, sort of gaining more and more acclaim, selling albums, releasing an album, the infrastructure around her seems to grow significantly. And I'm curious how that affected shooting, if things got complicated, if there were, there's more people that are like sort of in her life than when we first, than when the film begins. So I'm curious a little bit about how the world around her worked to accommodate the fact that you were filming her.
Zero impact. Zero impact. I mean, it's a really good question, right? Because in a way, we're the one constant in her we and her family unit are the constants in her life through this thing that is going on, that's exploding bigger and bigger and bigger. It's me, and Jenna's holding the camera, and Jay's got the boom, and Trevor's in the van, and that's it. Wow. And that's it. And that's always it. And it's never going to change. We had a very specific shooting strategy for performance that that Jenna always followed, which was this kind of very intimate verite approach. My direction was that I wanted the audience to feel Billie breathing on stage. I wanted you to be in the moment with her performance on stage in a way that only a camera could achieve, so that it's different even than a live performance. But it's not that kind of, swooping camera, all about the equipment type of performance filming that we see, that's pretty prevalent in when pop music is presented. I was, Give Me Shelter was the model, the Maysles brothers film about the Rolling Stones. I wanted you to connect with her as intimately as possible. And sometimes that involved multiple cameras during performance, but we were never more than one camera during a shoot. And on Grammy night, because we weren't given access, we were an iPhone. Jenna kind of masqueraded as a member of Billie's entourage, and everybody had iPhones backstage at the Grammys. So there was, but one of the people who had an iPhone backstage at the Grammys was, one of the world's great cinema verite cinematographers, and that's Jenna Rocher. And there she was with her. You can see her even in the film holding the iPhone. And there are even some scenes that were not there at all, which is really an element of the contemporary documentary filmmaking that, is so interesting and exciting to talk about. But there's so much footage being filmed by others,
Right.
coincidentally, that if you are resourceful, you can not be in Milan when Billie tears her ankle ligaments and still edit that scene together. And as if we were there. It's hard to imagine that we were in LA in August while Billie was tearing her ligaments in Milan. And yet you hear her, you feel her, you see her, because we collected, pretty much everybody who had an iPhone on was, we got their footage.
That's amazing. I was actually going to ask, if there was anything that you really wanted that you missed that had happened. Is it for me that some of the really serendipitous moments in the film are when Katy Perry goes up to her, and says like, we should talk. I've been on this path. And then when she connects with Bieber,
yeah,
and they're like, there must have been times where stuff like that was happening, and you weren't around. But it sounds like,
well, this is
crowdsourcing.
One of the many incredibly valuable lessons I learned as D.A. Pennebaker and Chris Hedges' producer on The War Room, which is the first film I did, was that you're going to miss 97% of the things you want. That was Penny's guidance. Don't worry, we'll miss, because when you're new to it, it's the agony is too great to fathom. You're going to miss 97% of what you want. That's a hell of a way to spend your life. But if you figure you're going to miss 97% of it, you find that you're very forgiving on days that would otherwise really sadden you. And sure, things are happening all day long that you're missing, and especially for someone who's such a public figure, you open Instagram and you're like, oh man, we didn't get that. Oh, we didn't see that. But life is quite beautiful. It tends to function in patterns. It tends to repeat itself. It tends to rhyme. There are lots of ways to get beginnings, middles, and ends. The more familiar you get with this, the more you discover that. And then we live in this moment where everybody's got a camera in their paw all day long, everybody. So there are things you can make up if you need to. When the folks in New Zealand are singing When the Party's Over to Billie, and when she and her gang get off the airplane and they're in the airport, there's, I wouldn't have minded having a couple of other angles, and the airport had people shooting it, and they destroyed, they threw the footage out after they had created a 1-minute kind of PR tape out of it. I wouldn't have minded having that, but that stuff is so truly inconsequential. And what was amazing about this experience was more that it wasn't what didn't we have, it was more that there were so many moments where we were able to fill the gap because you could find a piece of footage, or there was something that had been filmed, there was a house camera on the show, and we filmed a lot. We shot 120 something days on this movie, so we were there a lot. We were there pretty much, I'm going to say, through the year we were there, we filmed, 2 weeks out of every month.
So I'm very curious, her boyfriend is sort of not really in a lot of the movie when they're still together. Was he reluctant to be filmed, or was that just timing?
It was just what we witnessed. It wasn't, I'm not.
I mean, I don't need you to like dig deep into a relationship status. I just meant like you've got the very personal stuff with the family, and then you've got the very public stuff when she's on stage. But then you've got other people that are important to her.
Yeah. And
that maybe aren't like signing on to be in a documentary from the get.
No, everybody's signed on. Everybody's, there's a lot of a lot of footage of Q that isn't in the movie. There's a, it's not everything's very specifically chosen, and everything's very proportionate for good cause. Zoe's in the film as well. There's footage. I think that there's another a very close friend of Billy's who didn't end up in the film really, except incidentally. Um, uh, this is how you make the movie. I kind of want to say, well, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes long. How much more can we put in? But that's not really the process.
Right.
It wasn't as though, the Q story is kind of, it's a, you're making, it's a delicate mix of proportion, and the editing process is a whole other thing. That's it's the giant block of clay that you're kind of carving away at, learning from it what it wants to be, what the story is, what the themes are, where the emotion is, what the narrative is, how it wants to play out. So Q is in it, kind of exactly as much as we want, as the film wants. It's that kind of a thing.
I see that we're getting a bunch of questions, so I will start calling on people. But I want to sort of like ask one last thing, which is about the sort of her self-awareness of her own image, because there's this amazing sequence in the film where she's just finished a concert. She's being asked to take a bunch of group pictures. She's very upset. She doesn't want to do it. And you see the process with her mother and her publicist and people from the label. And then you see later on the bus, her reflecting on this, saying, I don't want my fans to see anything that's embarrassing. But, you're obviously filming, warts and all, her life. So it's sort of like the fans will see her. Do you feel like she's aware the whole time, or does the camera disappear for her? Was there any attempt, like if she did something that she felt was embarrassing, to kind of, whether through a proxy conversation with her parents, explain how she felt in that moment? I'm just curious if you felt that level of self-awareness throughout.
No, I don't, it's not even near the way we kind of approach it is Billy, I'm trying to figure out how to answer that. If it's on anybody's minds, it's not on my mind. And it's not how we're just filming. We're filming 8 hours a day. When we're filming so many things. And if my goal were to embarrass Billie Eilish, I could have embarrassed. I'm not saying that you're suggesting that it were. I'm just saying if one were to worry about my embarrassing Billie Eilish, or my having the footage to do so, one would have been very busy worrying about that. Part of the trust that this is why I'm saying all there is trust. So once they trust you, they're trusting that you're, I don't think it's easy to invest your trust in a filmmaker who's watching your life in this way. And the camera doesn't disappear. You suggested, I'm not a magician. And I also, if people use this phrase "fly on the wall," I'm no fly. I'm a pretty big guy, and I'm very present. I am me. I am me in these rooms. I am me engaging. We have a real relationship. And Jenna is Jenna, and she's got a camera, and Jay's got a long boom. Those things there's no disappearing. There's no fly on the wall. There is only human connection between the filmmakers and the subjects, and that connection ideally is one that allows the subject to to be as comfortable being themselves when you're filming them as they are with anybody with whom they're fully comfortable being themselves. And that is the key. So, so when you're fully comfortable being yourself, you're not worrying if the person you're with is, you can fill in the blank any way you want. That's not what you're doing. You're just being yourself.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions, and what I'm going to do is start transferring some people over so that they can turn on their camera and ask it live.
Sweet.
I'm going to do this in batches. So when I bring you over, please let us call on you. And if I haven't called on you yet, just keep your camera off. It'll speed things up. So I'm going to start with Holly Ray, Eleanor Cummings, and Jacob Salerno, and then I'll put a running list in the chat. So let me bring over Holly first. And then as soon as Holly's on board with us, I'll bring everyone else. Hey.
Hi, can you see me? Sorry, it's so dark. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and experience. I love this documentary. It moved me, and it was so powerful. And
Thanks.
It's always really amazing to see like artists and people so influential who are willing to open up and be vulnerable and show the world that like we're all the same. We all basically have the same struggles, regardless of our lives. But I'm curious, as someone who dreams of working like with an artist to tell stories in this intimate way, how did this documentary come to be? Did she find you, or did you approach her saying, I'd love to make a film about your life? I'm just curious about how like the initial concept was born.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit about it before. I was approached. I think they had the idea kind of earlier, much earlier than the filming began. Billie and her gang had the idea. You know, they're very filmic people. They love to shoot. And Billie, you know, the thing about Billie that I found to be true is that she has the soul of a documentarian. I mean, her songs are stories about her life. And I think it's a big part of why we connect so deeply to her, is because her music is such an honest reflection on her human experience. And so I'm not surprised that it occurred to her as she was experiencing this kind of remarkable thing, becoming Billie Eilish as we know her now. And it took time. You know, they took time. This was not the story of someone who's discovered on the internet and then they're rushed out into the world and let's get a couple of albums out of them. The adults around her and Billie herself all wisely felt, let's do this. Let's do this at a human and humane pace. And during that period, of course, her everything grew. Everything around her grew. So I'm not surprised that they had the impulse to document it and the desire to find a filmmaker who they could trust to tell the story. And that's what happened. And I'll briefly repeat. I was invited to meet with them. We met. It was, I think we both felt a real connection. And also I felt the same way about her family and the folks with whom she works. And so we decided very quickly this was something we were going to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you
did
so much.
An amazing job.
Thanks.
Okay, we should have Eleanor.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me? I'm having trouble accessing my camera.
But okay.
I absolutely love the film. And one of the things that I think was interesting watching, obviously, as a fan of Billie, is that I wasn't familiar at all or expecting any story about sort of her physical health. And I wondered if you knew that going in and how you handled those developments as they unfolded, like the story, right, in, Milan, where she has this incredibly private physical issue that plays out in such a public way.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know about her history. On some level, the less I know, the better coming into a film. the more I'm in a position of learning and discovering, the happier I am. So I don't study my subjects before I film with them. I really try to, I was saying before, try to be in the moment as much as possible. And so over time, I learned about that Billie had physical challenges her whole life, that she thought of her body as something that might fail her, and that taking care of her body, as it would be for any performer, any athlete who was operating at the level that she's operating, and doing the kind of physical performance that she does, would have to take care of their bodies and work hard to make sure that they could maintain that performance, and that performance level, and that it became clear over time that this was going to be a big issue. And what an interesting thing that body becomes a theme, because there's physical body, there's performance, there's body image, there's the changing body of a young woman who's growing up. It all becomes very resonant. There's the connection between her taking care of herself and her independence. There's the dynamic between her and her parents. There's the child being carried by her father to the stage, that incredibly powerful image. And then there is the culmination, which is real. I mean, it's how we shaped the film, but it's really what happened. There is this kind of culminating moment in a way when you least expect it, in Milan, where the body just breaks down, and breaks down far worse than you thought, than you might think possible. She's torn ligaments. She's, and she's really got to make the decision, as she has to make decisions in so many aspects of her life, that now that she's becoming who she wants to be in all these areas, that she's going to have to take care of her body if she's going to succeed.
Thank you so much. I think it was so beautifully handled, and that's something that I've really seen in this kind of film before. I really appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Okay, Jacob, if you're out there, feel free to jump in.
Hello.
Hello.
My original question was you kind of answered, but last summer I asked you about, how you go about in documentary filmmaking, you go about creating the story. Is there an objective you come in with, or do you kind of just find it in in the moment, or in the editing room, and you've answered that? So I kind of morphed it into a different question, is that in terms of Billie's nonchalant / maturity, do you feel like that added to the aspect of cinema verite? And specifically, the moment that kind of stuck out to me is that with the relationship with her boyfriend, we kind of feel something is going to happen with that. And then when it does, when they break up, she just kind of says, yeah, we wanted two different things. And it's a moment that kind of comes and goes very quickly.
Well, I guess what I want to say is that Billie is, as a human, is a terrific subject for verite, because she's so real, and she's true to, she's authentic, and that authenticity, as it was for Bob Dylan in Don't Look Back, and as it has been for so many subjects that verite has really captured, is very powerful. It's the camera can see things even when they're not being revealed, but when you mix what the camera can see that's not being revealed with a subject who is very authentic and in the moment, that can be very, very powerful stuff. And I think that's what this film demonstrates. These guys are, this is a family that lives in the moment. They appreciate the meaning of the moment. Patrick speaks to it very specifically as Billie drives off once she gets her driver's license, that's really all you can do in life, is kind of be in the moment, and and then, let go of your expectations for anything else, they're existentialists. And I think existentialists tend to be very compelling verite subjects.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's go out to Ryan. Hey.
Hey.
Hi,
Hi.
Ryan.
Alex, thank you for facilitating this Q&A. And RJ, what a beautiful film that you made.
Thank
It
you.
deeply touched me. Thank you for making it. I have a couple questions. The first is, you talked about the essential role that trust had in making a documentary.
Sure.
And I'm curious, what did you do to get people to feel, as you said, comfortable being fully themselves?
Well, the way I like to describe it is that the way you earn people's trust is by being trustworthy. And that's really how I would describe it. If you say it's just going to be me and Jenna and a sound guy, and you're going to meet Trevor, but you likely won't see him very often. And to be honest, if the room's small, you probably won't even see me because I'll step out of it. Then don't show up with lighting equipment and a truck full of cables and a crew. If you say to somebody, if you're tired, just tell us and we'll put the cameras down. We don't care. If you've had enough, let us know. And someone says, I'm tired, could we stop for the day? Don't say, no, I just need this one thing, because you're about to do this thing that I really need you to do, because that's not who you said you were. And in fact, what I tell the crew always is, let's shut the camera off 10 minutes before somebody tells us they've had enough for the day, because I want them to be happy to see us the next day. And the next day, I want them to miss us when we're gone. And sometimes we go away for a few weeks at a time so that they do miss us when we're gone. And then when we come back, they're like, oh my God, you missed so much. And I'm like, okay, let's not miss it now. And so there are a lot of applications of this. We could do a full hour on what trust is and what it means. But I would answer that the way I earn the trust of my subjects is not any different than the way you earn the trust of anyone with whom you're in a trusting relationship. And those are the principles we operate on.
Thank you.
Thank
May
you.
I ask one more?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So I'm curious, it's a personal question. I'm curious how, as an artist, making this documentary changed you, if at all, if you gained any insights into your craft or humanity by making it.
Well, sure. I mean, but that's because I'm in a very meaningful relationship with some remarkable people. So of course it's gonna change me. I mean, I have a couple of young kids. So we started the film. Let's see. I met Billie the summer of 2019. Is that what we said? No, the summer of 2018. That's when my son was probably 2 months old. My daughter was 2.5 years old at the time. So imagine spending so much time with Maggie and Patrick over the next couple of years and talking to them and connecting with them, and not only observing them, but these are real relationships. We're not objective observers. We're real people, and these are there's great beauty in this in these experiences, because you get to float into people's lives, into their worlds, places you would never go. A presidential election, a year at Vogue magazine, making the September issue. So many different things. A group of kids, in their senior year of high school, a year with Billie Eilish. I would never be there otherwise. And and the finite nature of it, or the tendency towards a finite nature of it, it can be challenging because you miss people, you know, and but you have that deep connection, and you really do learn to treasure it, and it does change you, but it changes you the way, again, this is all very natural and organic. It changed me the way, in lots of ways, the way you would imagine it changed me. Getting to know Billie, getting to experience her, her life and her work and her choices and her relationships, and the way she and Phineas connect and collaborate. How can it help but change you in a deep and I want to say beautiful way? It's a great gift. So yeah, there you go. And listen, I'll say, let me tell you something a little bit more specific about filmmaking. These films are two things when you talk about the personal, the personal, how much they're about me. One is that the film is a collaboration between Billie's life and my filmmaking, or our filmmaking, my team's filmmaking. That's a really important thing. If you were the director, it would be a whole different film, be a whole different experience. And also it's a combination of what I witness, what we witness, and what we experience while we're witnessing it. And again, as a result, I believe, I'm certain of it, even if I gave you every frame of footage that I had, the film, and all the same people, the film that you made would be completely different, because there is something essential that these films are, that are a reflection of the artists who are making it. And that's really fascinating and exciting and rich and poetic. And it speaks to the question that you're asking.
Thank you, RJ.
Sure.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Let's go out to Tia next.
Hi, Alex. Hi, RJ.
Hi, Tia.
Thank you so much for facilitating this conversation. This documentary, as others have said, was, in my opinion, groundbreaking. I think the vulnerability demonstrated in this narrative was incredible. And my question has to do with a personal experience I had with Billie in 2018. I had the opportunity to meet her when she was sort of blooming, and it was unreal because she simply didn't know why there was a line outside of, you know, the building where her meet and greet was taking place. And there was a moment of me realizing, like, wow, this is a real, authentic human being with a lot of fears, a lot of just dreams and hopes, but also someone who is so incredibly humble. And I wanted to know how, as a filmmaker, you were able to really encapsulate her gentle nature beyond just her vulnerability. I think what stood out to me were these moments of just like holding on her, you know, her face for a few extra seconds, or just allowing her to feel on camera without her even having to speak. So that was really inspiring to me, and I wanted to ask you more about that.
I'm so glad. Thank you. You know, what allowed me to do it was that I felt what you felt. You experienced it. You experienced it in a few minutes, and I had the great privilege of experiencing it over the course of a year. And so when we were editing the film, I knew that was important to capture. You couldn't help but capture it in the filming, and I knew that it was important that we capture it as well in the editing. And I think there were two things that well, there's one thing, but it applied twice. My experience. I have a lot of experience now, so I don't want to call it courageous, but I'm more, I will defend my vision with greater ferocity. I've always believed that was a part of my job. You're paying me. One of the things you're paying me to do is to defend the thing that we're making. But to the extent that you can imagine that a 2.5 hour, close to 2.5 hour documentary is responded to during the process of the making of it. As you can imagine, one of the things that's likely for the filmmaker to hear is make it shorter, right? But making it shorter would have meant that the very thing you're talking about, and I believe, I'm certain that I'm right, the very thing that people are responding to, this truth, this emotion, this human, you would have sacrificed a lot of that because what are you going to tighten up? That's the stuff you're going to tighten up. And we explored it. And when we explored it, we found that it was the things that one needed to sacrifice would have been the very essence. So I've defended it. I don't want to overstate it and say that I defended it with my life, but I do want to say that if I was willing to defend it with my life, and I certainly defended it with everything that with whatever, my persuasive nature, my forceful personality, my final cut, which I had, and which was necessary, and which, let's just say if I needed to employ it, I did. I also want to make clear that I was surrounded throughout the process on the kind of, the Apple, Interscope, even Billie and her family side. I was surrounded by people who supported my vision. I was trusted, I was supported, I was given enormous latitude. But, it gets intense late in the process. And these very elements that you're speaking to were the things were so important to me to protect, because they're delicate. And they needed protection, and they needed to be in the film. And I'm grateful to you for recognizing that, because it's what it is. This is, if we're here to tell the story of Billie Eilish, we're not going to have come and gone without capturing that essence. So thanks for asking.
Thank you. It was beautiful.
Thanks.
All right, Michael, you're up.
Thanks, Alex. And thanks, RJ, for being with us.
Thank you, Michael.
You've already said that when you first began to talk with the family, that you gave them a sense of the kind of film it was likely to be. And you suggested that they had an understanding of sorts about what a verite film was. And I'm wondering about that, because, or had they seen some of your films? Had they seen the way you interacted with James Carville or Anna Wintour? Because if they had thought about it, they might have said, okay, maybe it's like Don't Look Back, but it's like Don't Look Back meets An American Family, and so how sophisticated a sense of what they were getting involved with do you think they had as subjects?
I suspect to varying degrees, but I don't know. There are a number of things I don't ask. I never ask why do you want a film made about you? I remember going to see James Carville in Little Rock, Arkansas. We'd done some filming on the War Room, and to keep a long story short, we had discovered that James Carville was in the footage, and we realized we wanted to make a film about him and George, but really about him. And so we went down to Little Rock to talk to him, and James said, well, why on earth would I allow you to do this? I'm trying to get a man elected president. I've spent my whole life building up to this point. I'm nearly 50 years old. I don't want to sit around. Why would I spend time sitting around worrying if my mother's going to see me cussing on camera when I should be worrying about what the message of the day is from this man who I'm trying to get elected president. And I was there with Penny and Chris and Wendy Ettinger, my producing partner on the film. And And my instinct was sing and dance, Penny. Go, tell him why. Tell him all the reasons. Tell him about how it's important for history. Tell him about how amazing he is and how he leaps off the screen. Say, sell, baby. And Penny said, after a long pause, which was agonizing for me, I don't know. I don't know why you do it. It's none of my business, to tell you the truth. And he went on, he said, I can tell you why I want to do it and why this is meaningful work to me, but it's up to you why you want to do it. And James thought for a while and said, well, let me think on it. And I'll be in touch. And we went back to the hotel room in Little Rock, and I was like, what the fuck? I didn't say it, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, my Lord, the man gave you an opening and you didn't, I sure hope this Pennebaker knows what he's doing. And guess what? The phone rang and it was James, and he said, come on down and film. And we never discussed it. There was never anything to discuss again because he had made the decision. But I learned that incredible, among the hundreds of lessons that I learned, if not thousands, from Penny and Chris, that was one of them. This is it's a very complex thing. We humans want our story told. We're here for a blip. We're here, we come, we go, that'll be that. It is a human need, but there's so much more. It's really complex. It's rare. It's a rare opportunity. So we don't quite know, and I don't ask. And I like to say, someone invites you to a party, you don't say, why did you invite me to the party? You go and grab a handful of cashews and, have a good time. And so that's what I do. So I really don't know, but I do know that in our first conversation, I said, don't look back. And I said, give me shelter. And, it was up to them. And if what they had seen or not seen of mine and what they eventually watched, honestly, I don't know to this day. Patrick would love to kind of sidle up to me during shoots and start talking to me about the nature of documentary. That's Patrick. Those would be always wonderful, thoughtful conversations. And, not just that, but they're also Patrick and Maggie are they're people of the theater. That's my background. They met doing, I think, O'Neill at the Alaska Repertory Theater. And so we would talk theater also, but like I say, who knows? But I obviously think they picked the right filmmaker to do it. But more than that, I'm so grateful that they did, because it was, it's been a very, very rich experience. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, let's go out to Julia.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks
Hi,
for hosting this Q&A. I have a question about Phineas and Billie. You mentioned how, or someone pointed out, like how this documentary does such a good job of bringing Billie's essence to life, but you've simultaneously mentioned how important her family is. And I know that most of Billie's music wouldn't exist without Phineas. So how did you balance showing their collaboration, but also making her the driving force? And then on a separate note, I'm curious when and how you got paired with Apple, because I think you mentioned the first meeting was summer of 2018, when I'm not sure Apple Plus TV Plus had launched yet. I think it was right after that. And if they tried to take away your director's cut or not, I don't know if you know.
Well, I'll dance around some of that, but I'll answer it all. I think we found the balance because we the balance of the Billie Phineas dynamic, but just because we told it as it is, they are a remarkable collaboration, and I think that they would be the first to tell you that they're a duet. They're not they're called Billie Eilish, but they're, and Billie's the front person and Billie's the famous star, and Billie has, 78, it's going up by the second, but 78 million followers on Instagram, and Phineas, but Phineas is the world's greatest producer, and he's if he didn't have a 19-year-old sister who was the most famous pop musician in the world, you'd think he was a child because he's only 22, 23 years old, right? And you look at him, he was producer of the year. I don't know, if you're a fan of Phineas's, check out the piece he did with Justin Bieber. Lonely, is it called Lonely, I think, which was I mean, geez, that's Bieber at his absolute finest, but it's also Bieber at his kind of most Phineas. It's a real collaboration, and Benny Blanco's on that too, right? And I mean, it's so soulful in that way that Phineas really, another documentarian, he really draws that out of the artists with whom he works. And so we showed that, and we balanced it just by, I think, trusting our instincts and also having access to that incredible footage. So, but it is important to me. You know, I think about, I met these guys and I was like, who are they? Like, they're so human, but then they're also so extraterrestrial. They're like, where do they come? What planet do they come from? And then you realize, well, they don't, it's unlikely they come from another planet, but it's definite that they come from the same mom. And that meant I was like, you know, it's ooey and everything, but you know, they both gestated right next door to Maggie's beating heart for 9 months. And that's the drum beat they were born with. And they like to say that Billie came out of the womb singing. It's hard not to believe it. And so together, it's just like this, it is miraculous in a way, what they're able to do. And it was very important to us to capture that. Apple was part of a whole, this is, you know, it's film school. So we should talk about business to some degree. You know, we brought the film to market. We pitched it to everybody. And this was about, it was towards the end. Oh gosh, I got to figure it out. I can't remember the timing, but we were a few months into filming, and so maybe it was springtime, though. I guess. And we were a few months into filming, and we brought it to everybody. We brought it to Netflix, we brought it to Amazon, we brought it to Apple, we brought it to HBO. You know, everybody who every home for premium a documentary film, and everybody was interested, and it was, you know, very exciting. And I don't know, what's the question? How did they get involved? So it was a few months in, and we cut a sizzle and we showed it. But what really we showed was the unedited. I mean, there was a sizzle and it was awesome, but there was the unedited iPhone footage of Billie in the backyard conceiving the video for When the Party's Over, and that with Patrick in the background picking up the dog poop and the dead mouse and working over by the garbage bins, and Billie being bratty but being an absolute genius and being so specific about everything, you know, her articulation of her vision, and the fact that was something she had you know, given to me, you know, on her, she had airdropped it to me a couple weeks earlier, and I was like, you really want to see this? And so people were very compelled, and then there was an exciting bidding war, and then Apple got the film. And I don't want to talk too much about the business dealings in terms of things, but I do want to say that I had Final Cut. As of today, I still have Final Cut, and I was unbelievably supported by the executives at Apple. They supported me through thick and thin, which is to say, they supported me when I agreed with them, but they also supported me when I didn't agree with them. And it was a very intense experience, but towards the, you know, during the editing, the last few months of editing, but it was also a very rich experience. And the way I usually summarize it is to say, I think I've said it already, the cut you see is the director's cut of the film. I truly wouldn't I've been asked, do we want to add some stuff and bring it out in the fall when theaters are open again? I'm like, if we're going to do that, let's just bring it out in the fall the way it is. This is the thing. This is complete. So I hope that answers your questions.
Thanks so much. It definitely does. And I'll see it again in theaters if that does happen. So
good. Spread the word. Tweet that out.
All right, let's bring up Kristen. Hello.
Sorry.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi.
So, hi. So, my question is about security, really, or I guess privacy as it relates to security. One of the scenes that really struck me as I was watching the film is when she gets her new car and she drives off and you see her license plate and it's not blurred out in the film, and it's recognizable. It's kind of like a vanity plate. And so much of the film takes place at her personal family home, which I
all of that
wouldn't be very hard to find if you were looking for. When you started making the film, she had a kind of micro celebrity, but by the end, she's a huge star. So I guess I wonder to what extent the consequences of her growing celebrity figured into how you thought through the edit of the film.
Yeah, I want to do your question justice by not, but I'm going to answer it specifically, and then I'm going to answer it more broadly. The specifics are that, well, I offered to blur out the license plate, but it had been all over the place anyway, so it was not necessary. And we did blur out the address on the house, the street number, but that also had been everywhere. It's in, once it's on the internet, because Maggie directed a film that Billie wasn't in, which is a whole thing. She cast Patrick, and she cast Phineas, but she didn't cast Billie. This was like, 8 years ago. And but as Maggie says, there was no part for Billie. So and that film was shot at the house, and that film is available and is online, and people found it and they found the number, and they, people know where Billie lives if they want to, and bless them. By and large, they leave her alone. She's currently, it was in the news not that long ago. There's a 5-year restraining order against a guy who just wouldn't stay away and was creepy. There were some other incidents that happened while we were filming that, her growing celebrity, you're right, led to growing vulnerability, especially for people who didn't want to leave the place that they had lived their whole lives, and that's who they are. But again, I don't want to just dismiss the question by virtue of the fact that we would have, but it wasn't necessary. You have to think about everything. And you do. The point of this film is not to tell everybody where Billie Eilish lives so that they can storm her home. The point of to the degree that I felt anything we were doing might contribute to that, we were perfectly happy to not do it. But in these cases, it wasn't necessary because we were going to blur it. It was on the blur list. I hate blurring. I really do. I hate it. I hate doing anything like that. But you can now do it so subtly, and it's part of the coloring process. And you take some reflections down also, because who wants to see a camera and a boom operator? And also, you don't want to. It's not Jenna's fault that the trailer at Coachella is nothing but mirrors and reflected surfaces. That's not her fault. So if I can help her out by blurring stuff, of course I'm going to do it, and I did. But as I say, these things were not necessary to do because they had been exposed otherwise.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, let's see, just a few more. Let's go to Caitlin.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for taking this time to really answer all these questions so thoroughly. It's really interesting to just be able to pick your brain this way. I actually had the privilege of taking a documentary production class last semester. And for me, one of the biggest issues I think I felt was kind of making the right choice in music. And for a film to be so centered around someone's life and someone's music, because that is their life, it's their career, could you kind of walk us through, I guess, the thought process and the decision-making process in terms of music use, both kind of passively and actively? You have extremely meaningful lyrics, but you also have the kind of spoken narrative, obviously, that goes along with everything. And if you have any immediate kind of challenges in mind that came with that.
Oh man, that's the question of that we really we could. I said we could talk. There was something I said we could talk about for an hour. We could talk about trust. We could talk about this for several hours. Because one of the things that really excited me was about the film was that I suspected there would be an opportunity not only to make a great or to make a film about Billie and all the things that were going on with her, but that it was likely going to be a musical, and it is structured as a musical, so much so that you know, that intermission is it divides the film in a very important way, in a before and after, and a 2-act structure, which is a structure borrowed from the theater more so than from anything else. But it's, you know, that's like the Sound of Music to me, that that intermission. And that's what I'm thinking about when I did it. It's, you know, there's a whole life change that happens during that intermission. Billie goes to sleep the night after Coachella 1, and when she wakes up, Justin Bieber's singing her music. You know, he's getting ready to hug her and welcome her to this other side of the life experience that she's going to have. So and the music in the film is, I mean, we worked as hard on that as anything else. There's only one source of music. It's Billie and Phineas. I mean, there's incidental music. There's music Billie listens to and music Billie loves and music Billie sings that other artists have created, including Justin Bieber's. But the score of the film is all stems from Billie and Phineas's music, and the songs that she sings, as you point out, have lyrical content, and that lyrical content is meaningful and specifically chosen to articulate things at the specific moments in the film when they do. So we spent a lot of time working on that, and there are portions of the film, when the film was 3 hours and 3.5 hours long, it was mostly those things, because, you know, where she now sings Wish You Were Gay and I Love You at the South Street Seaport in New York, she used to sing 6 songs, and you would sit through all 6 of those songs. And believe me, we would sit there saying, I don't think we should cut a frame. I think maybe people are going to want a concert in the middle of this movie, and maybe 3 hours isn't too long. You know, we were delusional, but there was an arc to the performance, and it was all this stuff. I'm just saying, we thought about all these things that you're asking. How did we think about it? I guess if I were to break it down, I would say we're thinking about the musical content. We're thinking about its emotional value. We're thinking about the lyrical content. We're thinking about its emotional value. Then we're also thinking, what did we capture in terms of how we shot it? Because sometimes, you know, your shooting's better than others. You're not always in the sweet spot. And I will tell one story, which was that late in the process, we decided that the music was too sad right around when they went off to Australia. And we replaced the song that we have in the cut now with, which is so beautiful, and we replaced it with 7 or 8. I think it's called 8, which is a ukulele song that's on the album but doesn't appear otherwise in the film, and is about it's about Q, who's also known as 7, but she called it 8, and it was the 8th song on the album. Anyway, we replaced it, and we thought we had solved a problem, and we were very happy. And then we got into the mix, and we were like, oh, no. We blew this. We messed this thing up. And, you know, you're not supposed to really change things in the mix. It was very high stakes and not inexpensive in terms of time and a little bit in terms of money, and it was Christmas holidays, and it was dramatic, but the decision was clear, and I made it instantly. And I was like, we are swapping this, and we're going home, and we're re-editing the scenes, and we're going to figure this out, and we're going to get it right. But the music, the short version of this, because as I said, it's a 3-hour conversation, is that the musical content, the lyrical content, was key to the way we conceived the entire movie. Even to the degree that we started the film with Bored, which to me was a way not only of introducing Billie and her freedom and the beauty of that performance, and giving her an opportunity to say, y'all better be okay, because if you're not okay, then I'm not okay. But it's like a little bit of a prayer at the beginning of what's going to be a long journey. I want you to settle in. I don't want you to think this is going to be over anytime soon. I want you to give yourself over to the film, give yourself over to Billie, give yourself over to the music. And that's why we begin with that and play the whole song. And believe me, there were people who were like, do you really need to play the whole song? Do you need to play any of the song? Wouldn't it be great to start with Billie and Phineas at their house, and then you discover she's famous? And the answer was no. The answer was no, we're going to start with a prayer, because that's what this experience calls for, I felt. And so there you go. Next time you ask, we'll spend 3 hours together talking about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Of course.
All right, Chloe, you're up.
Thank you both so much for this. I really enjoyed the doc, and I've also enjoyed this time tonight. I've learned so much already. My question is what was some of your favorite scenes or moments that you got to be a part of or experience with the family and the rest of the team throughout filming?
Oh gosh, we had a really great time with them. I don't know. I don't even know how to answer it. But one of the things that happens is that as you turn the corner and you're in the home stretch on making a film like this, it's the unnatural part of it is that your relationship is finite. You've grown you've gotten to know each other so well, and you care so much about each other. And there's so many people involved. There's so many people involved in our life of making this film that are not even on screen, that are, Billie's team, Billie's crew, Billie's management, the label, it's just so many people. And as you get closer and closer to the end, although there's so much going on that has nothing to do with us, we couldn't possibly be less important. There is a deepening of an emotional connection. So you tend to remember it later in the process, with a lot of fondness. And we were done filming, and we were deep into the edit. We were a couple months into the edit, and I got a call one day, Billie's about to start touring again, and it's a new tour, and we couldn't help but think maybe you guys should go down for the first day of the new tour. And I was like, yeah, it's not necessary. We're okay. We're all good. Don't worry. Well, we really think maybe you should go down there. And I was like, I don't know. I'm pretty clear on the movie, and we got a good ending, and I feel okay. No need to go shooting. And well, if it's a matter of money, well, yes, it is a matter of money. It's very expensive, and people have all gone off to other things, and who wants to spend that money, and we're busy. And if we shoot for 3 days, we're very deep in with these guys. So we're going to shoot nonstop. And that's, 20 hours of material that someone's going to have to look at, and we're going to have to think about. And if it does affect the movie, that's a whole other, Megillah. And maybe we shouldn't open this can of worms. We'll pay for it. Billie sure would love it. So, okay. So we go down to Miami for the beginning of the new tour. And I it was fine to go. I guess I want to say I was happy to do it, but mostly I was happy to do it because it gave us a chance to all be together again after we thought it had been over. And that is something that I do have great fondness for, even though I have great fondness for every kind of moment of the experience. But there was those few days where I was like, well, we're shooting it, and it's delicious stuff, but it has nothing to do with that. Like everybody had changed. It was 3 months later. It was the new tour, and then the tour got, as you know, it all got cut short. So it was even like, I was in Miami on March 9th with 20,000 screaming teenagers. You don't want to see that. So anyway, it was very warm. It was very warm because we hadn't seen each other in a few months. So, but also, and this is something that is the only sadness of, not the only sadness, but one of the, we've had a wonderful experience sharing the film with the world, but what we haven't done is played festivals. What we haven't done is had premieres. And that usually it's an amazing experience to, of course, show your movie to audiences, but you get to bond with the team that made the film, not just the filmmakers, but the people who were in it during that period. There's always that great dinner at Sundance, and you have a little party, and you have an opportunity to celebrate, and you exhale, and it's a punctuation that, due to the circumstances of the moment we live in, we didn't get to experience. But we did have a couple of events. One was a premiere event, and then we all went to the drive-in the Saturday night after it opened, and Billy took a little curtain call when it was over, but also hanging out. That was those things are very, they're lovely and they're special. And the screening of the film, the only time I saw the film with an audience before we released it, this is so unusual for me, was when we screened it for Billie and her family and their team at the IMAX, in LA, and that was a magical night. So anywho, those are some of the things.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Great.
All right, we'll take one last one from Brittany.
Hi, well, first, thank you, Alex and RJ, for hosting this discussion. It's been amazing. And RJ, thank you for making the film. It was so captivating, literally from the first second to the end.
Thank you.
My question is, you mentioned early on about how this particular archive was like a bit disjointed. There were like some shows that were taped, and then, there's GoPro footage from when they kind of randomly decided to turn the camera on. So, in general, when you start working on a project, how do you approach an archive that is disorganized or disjointed? And then was there any difference with how you approached Billie's in particular?
No, what a great question, and thank you for asking. I've been working with great volumes of footage since American High, which was the first television series that I did in 1999. So what I learned is how important it is to organize these vast volumes of footage, hundreds, thousands of hours of footage, in a way that you really can access things. And the system that we developed on American High, and then refined on Freshman Diaries, and further refined on The Residents, and on and on and on, is the system that I always use. And I'm very reliant on the kind of it's a co-producer title, and sometimes it's a co-EP title, or sometimes it depends on if it's a film or a television show, but it's a very important member of my very small team is the head of story, who is also the head of archive, who is also the head of that kind of database of material, and tends to be the person who has watched close to every frame of what we've shot and close to every frame of what's in the archive. Now and in this case, it was a man named Jonathan Ruane, who had really worked, we first worked together on American High. So we've been working now together almost 20 years, but he had taken years off in the middle because he was a stay-at-home dad, and he had, he was raising his children. And fortunately for us, this whole process worked out so that he could be a stay-at-home dad and spend day and night watching Billie Eilish footage and watching the archive. So we watch it, we note it for for theme, we note it for story, we note it for character, we note it for other things. He knows my value system. He knows what I love. I watched as much as humanly possible. I mean, I had it, you know, they made a lot of fun of me during this process because I'd stay up until I couldn't stay up any longer watching footage because, and I was in the field every minute. So I also knew what we shot. So anyway, we absolutely process it. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that our process and our databases are proprietary. I think that other people use this, but we're very kind of secure. You can't send me, I'm about to start a project. I can't talk too specifically about it, but it's with somebody who has, you know, 30, 40 years of archive, and I was, bring it on. I don't, you know, we easy peasy. We're very confident. I work with not only with Jonathan, but then with 2 other archivists on different projects. Do you see that Defiant Ones? Did you see the Defiant Ones? That HBO series about Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre. Anyway, there's this amazing footage in that. It's not ours, but it's there's this amazing footage that was discovered in a garage in South Central of the day that Eminem and Dr. Dre met and wrote. You see them writing "My Name Is." I mean, it's incredible. And the guy who discovered that footage, Ryan, is you know, is an archivist I work with all the time. And then I try to keep this answer short. What we do is we have a system we've refined over years, and it's very important because you can't do it otherwise. You don't want to be haphazard. And the thing that freaks me out is the scene we forget. You know, I don't want to have forgotten anything. So we're very reliant on that process. Whew. Another 2 hours. We'll do 2 hours on archive.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking.
So thank you, RJ, for spending so much time with us and our students talking about this movie. I'm really excited that we got a chance to talk about the film with you, and that this is your second Q&A with us during the pandemic. I don't know if you've also been doing some classes, but I can gladly say that the next time we talk, it'll be in Norris, hopefully.
I would hope. It was always one of the frequent visits from filmmakers when I was a student was always a highlight, and it's a privilege to be able to you know, speak to you guys, and I'm grateful for the opportunity and the feedback, and so glad that folks are enjoying the film.
Have a great night. Take care. And
thank you. Talk again.